Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So this is session 10 of the Sutta studies for the Arranged Retreat 2023. And for the last 3 months, almost 3 months, we've been going through the Eightfold Path in detail. And I'm sure we've all heard about the Eightfold Path many times, but I was wondering how many people really give it much attention or give it some much contemplation. And of course, as we practice, these different factors, different 8 factors, they also have different meaning for us. They have, we start off with maybe practicing right attentiveness, samasati, but as you practice, it gains more meaning, it gains a different kind of emphasis in your life maybe. You see the value of it, and then we have to reevaluate then the rest of the factors of the Eightfold Path in light of that. So we begin with, and it is, I would say that the Eightfold Path is usually sort of like a progression. Although, now that it's come to the Western society, Western culture, somebody mentioned that most Westerners, they approach it kind of backwards. It's Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Yeah? But in the West, people usually come to the Buddhist teachings from a little bit of reading, a little bit of understanding first, and then Samadhi, and then maybe they wake up to the value of Sila. So it doesn't always have to be in a straight progression, but generally there is sort of like an evolution the Buddha was talking about. In order to be able to practice, especially the Buddhist approach to spiritual practice, one needs some degree of right view. If we don't have the right view in accordance with the Buddha's definition of it, then we aren't practicing the Eightfold Path. We're in some other religion, I guess. So basically, the right view is acknowledging the principle of causality. And then when we, and I guess in our Western society that isn't too difficult because it's kind of a science-based society. We're familiar with cause and effect. You do something and it has its effect. You go to work to get the money to buy your belongings, etc. There's a sequence there. But if we internalize that, what it means is that we have some appreciation or acknowledgement even of the principle of kamma, that our intentional actions of body, speech, and mind have an effect, both upon ourselves and externally too, other people and even society. And this is primarily based upon a principle, the guiding principle of the law of kamma, sometimes said, is that skillful actions give pleasant results, unskillful action give painful results. And that's sort of like, now that becomes a foundation of ethics or morality, if you like. And then from right view, we get maybe some interest then to do some further practice. We take it more seriously. We come to right aspiration, the aspiration towards renunciation, and non-ill will, and harmlessness. Those are the, you can say now we're beginning to put this principle of kamma into practice, realizing that these skillful attitudes, aspirations of renunciation, non-ill will, and harmlessness are skillful, so they'll give skillful results. And I think the real important one of these 3 is renunciation. This is really kind of the foundation of spiritual practice, I would say, because the goal of spiritual practice, put it very, very succinctly, is to realize selflessness, to realize the truth of no permanent self. So if you don't realize the value of renunciation, we are actually adding to the self rather than trying to renounce the supports for self. It's something I missed myself when I first started. I was, as many people are, I think, at the beginning, are spiritual materialists. So I thought I would just go to Thailand, for 1 month, get enlightened, and go home. Then when I finished university, I could put on my CV, enlightened also. I just thought of that recently, actually. I could add to my CV, I got this degree plus enlightenment I got in Thailand. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite so simple. It wasn't just like going to the university and taking a course in enlightenment. Because one had to deal with my own mind, which was complex, put it that way. I was going to say problematic, but I just say complex. It wasn't just a matter of, getting the information out of the book, but looking at your own mind. Here's your mind looking at your mind. So who's looking at what? Who's looking at who? Anyway, it didn't work out that way. So it took me a while to realize that it wasn't just a matter of adding enlightenment to the ego. The point is that, enlightenment is there when the ego is not. Huh? Right? Yeah. Yeah, but that's what the whole practice is about. How to, see through the ego's games, as it were. How to, we could say in Buddhist jargon, to let go of the grasping of self. But of course, there is the self trying to let go of itself. So it's sort of a what do you call it? Not ironic. It's a conundrum or something. A dilemma or something. But after appreciating the value of right aspiration, and it is an aspiration. I mean, first of all, maybe renunciation is more just in a physical sense. I'd say there's sort of like a progression too, like in the physical sense to, if you read those scriptures I mentioned on the board there, there is we undertake the precepts, a life of contentment, for example, contentment, keeping our life simple, so we have time and space to meditate, for example. So taking away a lot of the extraneous things of life. Eating to the extent of eating 1 meal a day, and simple clothes to wear, and etc. Simple lodging. But then it becomes, as you begin to meditate, it becomes more internalized, and I would say that the letting go becomes more like letting go the props for the ego, greed, aversion. Those are the activity of self. So learning to let go of them, seeing our moods arising. I like this, I want that, I don't like this. Eventually letting go of self-views. It's one of the harder ones because most of us don't even realize we have views about ourselves. But we all do, because the self is a bit of a mystery. It's a charade, it's a mirage of self. So you can't really pin it down. So people are still questioning, who am I really? Am I, am I enlightened yet? What level of enlightenment am I on yet? So various disguises and various forms of self, forms that self takes. So renunciation works on many different levels. And as we increase awareness, we begin to maybe notice them then. And then after appreciating the value of right aspiration, then to put that right view and right aspiration into effect, then we recognize the value of the precepts. Trying to follow these guidelines for skillful living, guidelines for wholesome actions of body, speech, and mind. Right speech, right action, right livelihood. So we ground the practice in everyday life. It's one thing to have your high aspirations, but then to try to put it into effect in your everyday life, talking with people, your physical actions, things you do and things you say, and even your thoughts. Though the precepts don't directly involve the thoughts, but it is the thoughts which affect the action and speech. It's said, in the Buddhist psychology, you think before you speak. Although it can be very quick, because sometimes your speech just comes out before you even realize what you say. The so-called Freudian slips and etc. Or the some of our emotions leaking out, even unintentionally, but they just leak out. And then after the recognizing the value of the precepts to ground our aspirations in everyday life, then the importance of meditation. Most religions have morality, of course. Some have, of course, they always have a view of some kind. Whether it's a theistic view or it's some kind of view, some kind of doctrine or dogma. And then morality, but it was it was the Buddha and a few other religions realized the value of meditation. And so now the Buddhism begins to diverge now from many other religions, because within meditation, for example, the Buddha realized the preeminent role of samasati. I define it as attentiveness or mindfulness. I don't think any other religion has a mention of mindfulness in it. But the Buddha raised up mindfulness to a really important position in the Buddha's teachings, number 7 in the Eightfold Path. It is a bit of a refinement. The morality that deals with our actions and our speech, which are usually fairly gross, fairly coarse. But then mindfulness, attentiveness, deal with our mind. Try to observe now the nature of body, feeling, states of mind, and the Dhammas. It is what we call bhavana, or mental development, literally. Translate bhavana from Pali is usually as meditation, but it literally means mental development. So developing this quality of attentiveness, which everybody has, but the Buddha realized the power of it, the value of it, for benefit of spiritual practice. And then from sati, from attentiveness, also mentioned in Scripture is attentiveness and clearly knowing. This is the clear knowing which comes from attentiveness, just seeing clearly the way things are, not based upon some view or opinion or dogma or doctrine, but how nature really is. Just seeing it, a non-reactive, non-interpretive attentiveness. And the Buddha gave it, quite a bit of value, but he realized also that, not everybody can develop it to, an advanced degree. So it can be supported by right samadhi, collectedness. If one has developed attentiveness to a reasonably high degree, then the mind is calm already. The mind is already collected. Being attentive to something, you have to be a bit more focused on it. But this attentiveness is a bit more flexible and broad. It's not a very narrow focus like samadhi. And it's a non-interpretive attentiveness. So, in order for you to be able to develop it, to quieten the mind. And the mind is still buzzing around interpreting. It's not really mindfulness yet. It's not really attentiveness, or not really well developed anyway. Then developing the ability to focus attention, in the right samadhi or collectedness. And the Buddha also, the Buddha sort of inherited this from the tradition in India at his time. And for some of the meditators, that was the main spiritual practice. Spending many hours with focused attention, and one could experience different levels of deep absorption. So you can say what samadhi does is also, can say it alters your consciousness, alters what you're aware of. Normally, the average person is only aware of the sense realm. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, But then when the mind is really, really focused, that falls away. in deeper levels of samadhi, there's no more sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. It's purely, I can say, more like a mental sense, if you like, being aware of the mental realm in the senses. So it's like a different experience, a non-sensual experience. And for some people, that can be the initiating, inspiration to really develop further spiritual practice. Realize, oh, my mind is only being aware of one small aspect of reality, or the sense realm. There's a whole other realm, beyond the senses. And to the effect that the Buddha even defined that the realm of jhana, or absorption, was one of the incomprehensibles. No, that's not right. Unthinkables, achinteya. I would say that one cannot comprehend it by conceptual thought. It's just so profound, and is such a deep, broad field of knowledge that can't be understood just by the conceptual mind. That's probably why there are so many different discussions about what really is samadhi. Many different views and opinions, because people have different experiences. Then you try and put this, you can say, kind of otherworldly experience into words, and it gets very confusing, to say the least. In some presentations of the Eightfold Path, there are two more factors added to it: samajnana and samavimutti. Samajnana is literally, it means knowledge, but it is usually refers to higher knowledge. So right higher knowledge. Because especially in the development of samadhi, there are many different kinds of knowledge one can develop. It's interesting that in the discourse about in the first discourse of the Digha Nikaya, it's about the 61 different bases for views, how different views developed. And I just read this recently. 49 of the 61 of these wrong views, basically, the Buddha is criticizing, came out of meditation experience. Yeah, it wasn't just reading books and getting the wrong view from books, but or no, didn't have books in the Buddha's day, but going to the wrong teacher. but people having deep meditative experiences and misinterpreting it. For example, some of them they could contact some kind of heavenly realm, so-called heavenly realm, and then they say, "Oh, that's it. That's nibbana. That's the highest." It's so sublime and it's so blissful, and there's no greed and aversion there. They think, "Oh, this is it. I've reached nibbana, nirvana." And then they expound the teaching based upon that. And the Buddha, with his profound meditation experiences, recognized, oh, that's only first jhana, actually. There's something beyond that, second jhana, and then the third jhana, fourth jhana, and like rupa, then the non-material jhanas, absorptions even, But a person could only, from their experiences, which was already quite exceptional, they make this conclusion. Yeah. And the main criticism the Buddha said was, he doesn't deny their experience. What he denies, what he refutes, is that they say, this is right, everything else is wrong. That is, they refuse to learn anything else. They hold this opinion, they hold this view now. Then they have wrong view, because they're holding on to this view, which, even though they don't know it's incomplete, but somebody else have a different view. So it becomes a wrong view then, because they're holding on to it. So right jnana, samajnana, usually means right higher knowledge, and sometimes it's used in the context of, it's also explained as sometimes as jnana dasana, knowledge and vision, or sometimes in its full form it is yetta bhutta jnana dasana, knowledge and vision of the way things really are. So when you see the way things really are, you have the knowledge. The knowledge, I would say, is the intellectual knowing of it, and the vision is the experiential knowing of it. So it's a complete experience of the way things really are. And then follows from that sama vimutti, right liberation. That's what we're waiting for, right? But it comes number 10, the tenfold path, after the preliminaries. And liberation, technically speaking, there's two kinds of vimutti. One is called ceto vimutti, which is liberation of mind. Then there's panya vimutti, liberation through wisdom. If you remember back when I talked about sama samadhi, I mentioned there's two kinds of meditation, right? Samatha and vipassana. Samatha meditation is calm meditation, primarily giving primary emphasis to samadhi. Vipassana meditation is giving primary emphasis to mindfulness or attentiveness. And sometimes the Buddha did say that this was ceto vimutti, it was liberation of mind, see? But it was not complete liberation. In the Buddhist context, unless there is vipassana, the mind is not truly liberated. However, it can seem like it. I mean, for the time that one is in deep absorption, one is liberated from, first of all the hindrances have to be suspended. So it's a very, very refined state. No more, you don't notice any greed, aversion, delusion. So it can seem like the mind is liberated for that time. The problem is it's still based upon some degree of attaching to a self. It's not an ultimate, not a paramatta realization yet. One hasn't seen through the illusion of ego yet. So it can be very, very refined, and people who have developed very high levels of samadhi, for example, they can seem to be very enlightened. They're very very peaceful state. They have no expressions of greed, aversion, delusion. It can be quite deluding in a way, quite confusing, because it seems to be very advanced. I don't know how many times I was sitting in my little hut in Thailand, up in northern Thailand mostly, in Chiang Mai, by myself, and the mind was so calm, I thought, this is it, I've made it. Because there's no greed, no aversion, and I like it. There's delusion. then of course the deep concentration, it cracks, it's destroyed. You see. As soon as I opened my eye, had that thought, this is it, I've made it. Already start thinking again, and no more collectedness. I got it, I can go home now. Ajahn Chah gave the analogy, it's like putting a big rock on the grass, you see. And it was just yesterday on the individual practice day. I was up in the hill up here, and there was a rock there. And I noticed it was on the moss. And I noticed that somebody had moved it. There was a spot for it, a bare spot, and then there was this rock. It was on the moss, so I picked it up to put back on its, and the moss there was still there. It wasn't dirt, and actually the moss under the rock was more green than the moss out in the sun, which was getting baked. So I attempted to put it back there again, but where the rock had been, it was just sand. You see, so I've been there a long time, and. So that's what the Ajahn Chah's analogy was, as putting a rock, like samadhi, deep concentration, is deep, it's like putting a rock on the grass. So it looks like the grass doesn't grow. I thought it was dead first. The moss was dead, where the rock was, But eventually you take the rock off, and the grass is still growing because the roots are still there. The roots of greed, aversion, delusion, of craving, grasping are still there, but they've been suppressed by samadhi. Your mind is in a very, very kind of exalted state, in deep absorption, and then it suppresses the defilements temporarily. So it could be, you can think that you're enlightened. And I'm sure there's many, many stories of masters who thought they were enlightened even, you know. There's one from the path of purification where a student of a great master, he was practicing, and then he realized full awakening. And with full awakening, you know, sometimes they also get the benefit of the special powers. Say psychic powers are released, or are accessible anyway. And then he, with his powerful psychic power of being able to read the mind, he surveyed the mind of his teacher and realized the teacher was not enlightened yet. Oops, here is a student enlightened and the teacher's not. So how can he help him? How can he, you know, a student going to telling his teacher he's not enlightened, you know, it doesn't, not nice way, it's not very polite. So the story goes anyway that he developed this technique. So he went to the teacher and he said, "Oh, I hear you're very good at at psychic powers." He said, "Oh yes, I'm really accomplished at this." He said, "Why don't you make a tiger? No, why don't you make an elephant? Make an elephant then. Conjure up an elephant." So the teacher says, no problem. So he conjured up this elephant, and then the student said, "Okay, now have the elephant charge towards you." So this, oh yeah, right, okay. So then he got frightened, of course, when the elephant's charging. Realized he wasn't enlightened, he still had fear. So, but then he was so advanced that it didn't take long before he was enlightened. So. Unfortunately, we don't have any elephants here, so we can't test you. Maybe some snakes. No. So right liberation then, you know, is with this Chetu Vimutti, liberation of mind is one thing, liberation through wisdom. And if we follow, for example, the guidelines of the discourse on Satipatthana, you know, as all you've been doing, right? Had 3 sessions on Satipatthana. So, you know, the main contemplation, you know, as well as being aware of the body, the feelings, the states of mind. You know, then there is the contemplation of the nature of arising, nature of passing away. Right? Remember that? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Don't need to give a test, do I? You remember? Probably the most frequent reference of, you can say, insight or wisdom in the Buddhist teachings is about trying to be aware of, trying to acknowledge, trying to see clearly the nature of arising and passing away, impermanence. It's here anyway. Impermanence is one of the characteristics of existence. You know, but most of us, you know, the very nature of the self is to preserve its permanence. Doesn't want to see impermanence. So it creates all these kind of devices, these kind of defense mechanisms, if you like. So sometimes it requires a conscious reflection, the arising and the passing, the arising and the passing. And if one develops that, you know, to a certain degree, you know, you can say there's also an emotional experience out of that. When one observes clearly enough nature of arising and passing, then there's a condition arises which is called nibbida. Nibbida is a bit hard to explain because we don't really have a suitable word for it or even a way to conceptualize it in the West. But when you see, for example, the uncertainty of life, you know, what do you feel? I mean, some people just feel kind of they feel fear, of course, you know, but the nibbida is something close to that, but it's just you know, what I thought was real, what I thought was permanent, suddenly now I see that, it's not. You know, so it's been translated as disenchantment. I translate it as disillusionment. You get disillusioned with your previous view of the world as being something solid and reliable and tangible and it's something you can depend upon. Now you see very, very deeply, not just intellectually, but with attentiveness, very strong attentiveness, and samadhi to some degree, you realize, oh my goodness, this is reality. This is the way things really are. None of that, there's a certain kind of disillusionment sets in then. Oh, my goodness, this is not how, this is how it really is, and I've been fooled. I've been cheated for so long. Or you can say, sometimes it's translated as a kind of a world weariness, recognizing, oh, to follow this previous way of looking at the world is not safe. It's not the right way. It's delusion. It's a illusion. So then, from disillusionment, from nibbida, then there also arises, following on from that, if this insight is deep enough, dispassion. Then, when I kind of lets go, dispassion, kind of an equanimity, or it's not also. But be careful. It's not an aversion, but it's just a kind of a stepping back from dispassion. Stepping back from it, recognizing it's no more, not a fun game anymore. And from dispassion, then release can happen, vimutti can happen. So there's kind of a disillusionment or disenchantment, then dispassion, and then a release, letting go or release then. And sometimes this can happen quite quickly, especially if there's an environment in which, say, some of these qualities have been intensified, like in a retreat, where the mind is much more quieter, much more attentive, it can much more sharp, much more clear and aware, and you just notice the nature of reality, and then, oh my goodness, just turning away happens. And then there is a release. I mean, I've taught many retreats, and mostly in the West, and there's some people, then I can talk to the people, you have an interview with them. Sometimes you need a translator from German or French, but but a few people have had similar experiences, and there is it's kind of like a pattern which people recognize can happen during a retreat. No guarantee, and it's not always not always. It follows the same pattern, but not always the same because it's different people. And many times it happens to people who aren't expecting it. I know a familiar pattern is that people come to a retreat and they expect to have peace of mind. So they come there and they're really, really eager, and they're really, really, going to put some effort into it. 10 days, get enlightened, or whatever it is, a week. I had a whole month. I was being lazy. A whole month in Thailand. Well, actually, it became 9 years, but still didn't work. Well, not to the same degree, but but maybe my first retreat in Sri Lanka, that was, I just thought I know nothing about meditation, nothing about Buddhism. Just went there and just thought I have peace of mind, yeah. And I sit there in this little room and the mind's going crazy. And one day it was just going on so, jabbering away so much, blah, 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 and I just, oh, shut up. And it did. The mind just stopped. I thought, wait a minute, am I crazy? No thoughts. Who am I? And then I started thinking again really quickly. I was so identified with thinking that I couldn't do without it. But then on hindsight, I realized, oh, that thinking, that when the mind stopped, it was so peaceful, and I wasn't dead. In fact, I never felt more alive than before. When you're thinking, when you're lost in your thoughts, you're not really alive, are you? You're in your brain. But when the mind stopped, everything was just so full of energy and alive. But I was so lonely without thinking. But it was just so, it was like a totally different perspective. There was probably some disillusionment there. There was some, obviously, dispassion. I just said, oh, shut up. I just fed up with my thoughts. They were just so irritating after so long, just so on and on so much. Just drop them, let go. It doesn't always happen, it's more like an experience. It doesn't happen, but just by thinking about it. When I was instrumental in producing one of the first books of Ajahn Chah's talks. And after the book was published, I was traveling a bit, and I was staying in this monastery, and there were some Westerners came there, and they'd already come across this book. And this person said, "Oh, I just love this Ajahn Chah, this letting go stuff. Oh, so wonderful. I just love to let go." So, I don't think you got it really. You're attached to letting go, are you? Yeah, it sounds so simple, but at least it gave people, I think, some new perspective on practice. Because most people, they were going to meditation retreats to gain something, to gain some experience and get something for themselves. But then Ajahn Chah was talking about letting go. So then some could relax. And many times the people who had that experience of, I would say, kind of disillusionment, dispassion, release, many of them, they didn't expect it. But it just came to them as, only way out. They really tried very, very hard to make their mind peaceful. That didn't work. They were at the point of just being almost crazy, trying to you think about your mind, think about not thinking, thinking about not thinking, trying to get your mind to not think. Just like you're going crazy, and you okay, I give up. And then, that's the way. Not to try and do it, but just do it. Not try and do it. But then, there is this experience of release, and it does have a value. It does have a certain value to it. But, unless one begins can find a way to now integrate that into one's life, to be able to live it, it soon just fades away. So I think there's quite a few people who've had, I can say, somewhat of a valid experience of release, liberation, if you like, in a small L, But because they aren't able to live in an environment which can support that, then it disappears again. It becomes a memory. That's what I think the Buddha means when somebody has had a real experience of vimutti. They say, if they had a real deep enough insight into no permanent self, they're called a sotapanna, a stream enterer. But this has to be such an intense experience that it does alter one's whole outlook on the world. One is really seen through the illusion of self, just for even a glimpse, but it really alters one's perspective on life then. And then one enters the stream, you see. Say enters the stream to Nibbana, because one of the characteristics of a stream enterer is that they don't fall back into the lower realms, you see. They are incapable of extreme immoral activity. They're incapable of extreme examples of supporting the ego or self-referencing, greed and aversion. So they don't slip back into the lower realms. So they're on the stream to Nibbana then. They say that it's said that the Sotapanna will be enlightened within 7 lifetimes. I don't know how they get to 7, but 7 is a good number, I guess. Doesn't sound too impossible, but not too easy either. But 7 lifetimes. So they still aren't enlightened. Still haven't realized Nibbana completely, but they've had the first glimpse. And then they're in the stream to Nibbana. However, what I think is that, the experience is that some people have had their glimpse, but they don't continue in the stream. Because they don't live that experience. They don't put it into their life and actually live it. It's like they dip their toe into the stream, then they stand back on the bank again and start living their life with ego referencing and self-referencing all over again, and they lost connection with it. So obviously it hasn't been deep enough, but it can be still quite transformative experience that people can recognize, oh, it is possible, it is possible. And you go back to right view again, cause and effect. Oh, this experience wasn't just a one-off experience. There was causes. Somebody had been living a moral life. They had kept the precepts. They had been meditating. They had been actually doing something skillful. And the culmination of that, you can't say when. You can't say when it'll happen. But all those conditions come together, and that experience of release happens. So they realize, okay, back to right view again, back to the cushion again, back to practice again. Try it again. Keep going with it. But the real important factor to remember is, it won't happen again exactly the same way. One of the three so-called fetters that the Sotapanna passes beyond is attachment to rites and rituals. What I think this means is that those certain factors come together for your experience of release. You can say the first one, but the next one won't be the same because your ego is different. Yourself is different now. It's been transformed to some degree. So while you follow the same principle, the Eightfold Path, but don't try to replicate that. There was one. I remember one experience I had in Switzerland on one retreat. This man came back for his second retreat, and he wanted to bring his girlfriend with him. I thought he's not a very good combination for a retreat. But we talked to them, and he was a meditator, and she wasn't, so he wanted to introduce her to it, and she was keen to learn. So I said, okay, possible, So they came on the retreat, and this man had not a miserable, but he didn't have a very good time on the retreat. Maybe he was thinking of his girlfriend, maybe, I don't know, but anyway. But the girlfriend had a profound retreat, totally new to it. We call it beginner's mind. She knew nothing about it, no expectations, And the boyfriend, he had experienced the first time, a powerful experience, and he was trying to replicate it. And I kept saying to him, it won't be the same again, don't try to just replicate it, But of course, that was his model, was what happened last time, you see. So he was, when's it going to happen again? When's it going to happen again? And it won't happen again like that, because you're living in the past, not in the present moment. And surprisingly, the girlfriend, who would do nothing about meditation or Buddhism, she just followed the instructions, and she had an amazing experience. So, I never heard from them later what happened. They married, maybe their friendship broke down because she was enlightened and he wasn't. I don't know. Who knows what happens anyway. So one of the three fetters that one relinquishes as a Sotapanna is attachment to rites and rituals, because it won't happen exactly the same way again. So while the principle is the same, morality, meditation, wisdom, etc. The same causal sequence there, but it won't be exactly the same again. And the second of the fetters to go, well, the first one is actually the belief in a self, belief in a permanently abiding self. When it's seen through it, one sees that there is no permanent abiding self. The impermanence can then expose unsatisfactoriness, and then the impermanence and unsatisfactoriness exposes no permanent self. The permanent self should be well all the time, and should be permanent all the time. But when you see impermanence, how can it be a permanent self then if everything is impermanent? And then the third one is doubt. They go beyond all doubt. There is a path of practice which will lead to liberation. So no more doubt about it. Even though the Sotapanna, the stream enterer, still misses the path, forgets, up to 7 lifetimes, they still forget the practice, but they never lose complete connection with it. There's still some kind of residual wisdom there that continues through many lifetimes. And then the liberation usually then follows in degrees. We talk about 4 different stages. Stream enterer, and the next one is the once returner, then the non-returner, then finally the arahant. And these are like refinements of the development of the path. What differentiates the once returner from non-returner, they say, is they haven't developed the samadhi to a significant degree. So their insights are not powerful enough. They haven't got enough samadhi. The samadhi gives you the strength of mind to penetrate very deeply. So even though they have some insight, some wisdom, but it doesn't go deep enough to really shift their personality, shift their attachments enough. So they just attenuate. They attenuate greed and aversion. Only the non-returner completely eradicates greed and aversion, which are the really coarse expressions of self. Greed, I want; aversion, I don't want. But there's still some subtle attachment. Even the non-returner has subtle attachments. There still is a residual conceit, and there's still a residual ignorance there, as well as maybe attachment to the fine material realm and the immaterial realm, and restlessness, they say, is the other one. Still some restlessness. So for the non-returner, if you want to get rid of your restlessness, you have to be an arahant. So for many people, it doesn't actually probably follow, so obviously, or so kind of rigidly. Maybe there's sometimes, greed and aversion, even if you're a so-called sotapanna, sometimes greed and aversion is much more attenuated. Still is some residual there, but sometimes it's gone away. It doesn't, I'll say the sotapanna, they don't have very, very strong emotional reactions to things. In the back of their mind, they still is a reference to, still is a kind of a remembrance of impermanence, and no permanent self. Don't feed that. Don't go into that. Don't keep up those patterns of self-referencing. So maybe some greed arises, but they don't make a big issue of it. Whereas the unenlightened person still imagines, greed is still referring to some permanent self. It's still some kind of, some kind of root energy I have to feed and have to keep it going. Greed and aversion. They can't see outside the box. They can't see beyond greed and aversion or self-referencing. But a sotapanna has had at least a glimpse of it. The ultimate reality is no permanent self. So you're not fooled anymore. You're fooled a little bit, 7 lifetimes, but not completely anymore. So for some people, that is an aspiration in this lifetime, because they say the so-called stream enterer, they say they're incapable of reverting to the lower realms. The lower realms, for example, in the cosmology, they talk about the animal realm. The animal realm is a fear realm. The animals are just victims of their greed and aversion. They haven't got no reflective capacity. I'm not trying to belittle animals. I'm just, I don't talk to them some. I'm just making assumptions. And they can't even complain about me belittling them. So, but they say animals are, so they can still compound. The beings in lower realms can still compound their negative karma, as it were. They still can create more negative karma and then prolong their wandering in the realms of birth and death then. But sotapanna is, they're free of that. I guess they get reborn as humans, I guess. At least a human minimal. Maybe in some of the lower heaven realms or something or other anyway. But But they don't revert to the lower realms, so they are free of developing or creating any kind of really serious negative karma. So they only can move forward. So unless you're a sotapanna, you're still, be dangerous. You still could slip back to the lower realms, and then you never know when your head comes up above the water again into the the simile of the blind turtle. Yeah. so otherwise, the aspiration towards sotapanna, very noble, but unless one does the practice, some people are just they're aspiring to it, maybe even greedy to be a sotapanna. But the Buddha didn't talk too much about the results of practice. He talked more about the practice itself. And as Ajahn Chah just said, if you live a good life, you're a moral person, upright person, you practice generosity, practice meditation regularly, then at the end of your life, you should at least be a sotapanna. You've put in a lot of your energy into skillful living and all the qualities which qualify you for sotapanna, stream entry. And some people, maybe they have some aspiration, they go on a one retreat, I'm not enlightened yet, okay, forget about it, try something else. But it's more the everyday practice, the patience, the continuity, little by little. The Buddha did talk about the path of practice being a gradual development. He gave the analogy of just like this is the sea, the ocean, gradually slopes down deeper and deeper. This path gets deeper and deeper and deeper the more you go into it. So, there's some people who they hope for a miraculous, I'll give it a month, like me. Some only got 2 weeks or 10 days or a long weekend even, Doesn't work this time, I'm giving up. Try something else. And, maybe sometimes people do have some kind of a powerful experience, but is it right liberation? Some of these, some of the practices can be quite extreme. I think some people, they go on a retreat and they can have an experience of a peaceful mind, and they think they've got really, attained some kind of great level, and really all it was sensory deprivation. You go to a quiet place, you come to a quiet environment for a retreat, you don't talk to people, you keep your eyes closed most of the time, and in a quiet environment, and just a sensory deprivation. Of course your mind will calm down. Doesn't require any positive samadhi. Even your cat would have a calm mind if they stayed here. Except for they might be chasing the pink peacocks, but but then they go back to their usual environment again, and oops, evaporates very quickly, because it's not being sustained by the environment you live in, by your way of living, your skillful living is not so skillful. And then all the distractions, just, so okay, back to the next retreat. And okay, it does give you some possibility that it can be different, and maybe sometimes the calm state of mind is like a little taste of liberation. You can be free of your usual busy mind or distracted mind or whatever. It's possible, but now we have to get back to working on it, through the whole steps of the Eightfold Path. Put them all together. When they all come together, say morality, meditation, wisdom, they all come together, and vimutti, liberation, happens then. So it's just a matter of cause and effect. And the only thing is we can't say exactly when these factors can all come together. But if we keep putting them together, we keep developing them, studying them, and practicing them, they will come together eventually. This lifetime or maybe next. So anyway, so we know about the Eightfold Path now, so hopefully you can put it all together and you realize liberation for yourself.
Sadhu, sadhu.
questions? Mm-hmm.
How do you let go of a strong meditative experience after it's happened?
Well, the first thing is just to reflect that it is just a conditioned experience. Just a matter of conditions. Yeah, so it's not going to be not permanent. It's not a absolute thing. See, yeah, it just many factors come together, like the Eightfold Path all comes together, and then vimutti happens, but then the conditions change, and then So the Buddha did mention that, especially for people who are good at deep meditation, when you come out of it, to always reflect, this is a conditioned experience. This is conditioned. It's so easy to take it really, really as an absolute, as some kind of this breakthrough. This is nibbana. And nibbana is permanent. You see. Yeah. But I don't think it's not really like that either. So you keep reflecting. Oh, this is conditioned. This is impermanent. Various factors came together to create this, and now they pass away again. Yeah.
And you also mentioned that you may experience something of a similar degree of concentration, but it'll appear different, completely different.
Mm-hmm.
That's makes me feel very unsatisfied for some reason.
Aha! Disillusionment setting in, nibbida creeping in there. Yeah. You just need to step back and look at the kind of broader picture. See, the details change.
Right.
Just like you're sitting in the car going somewhere.
Right.
The scenery changes, but you're still sitting in the car going somewhere, right?
Oh, of course.
So it depends on your perspective.
Oh, right.
So you just have to recognize, okay, right, it still is this faculty of knowing, still a faculty of understanding, but the details change. It's like it's an evolving process.
Oh, okay. And the text you mentioned, which listed the wrong views that can come from meditative experiences, where is that?
It's the first one of the long discourses. It's a bit technical and a bit abstract, but anyway. But you want to check to see if your view is right or not?
I'm just hoping for one wrong view.
There's more wrong views than there are right, But anyway. Yeah. So you don't have to hurry away today. You have to. No work today, huh? Oh yeah. Yes, yeah. He's already packed, waiting for you. So. So next week, this is the last one. No, last talk. Nope, this is it. Finish, yeah. This Sunday is end of Pansa, end of Vasa, Yep. This is the last one, yep. Because next Tuesday you'll be out of Pansa.